The human race, we bogged ourselves down in such bureaucratic nonsense that it seems like we've made life much more complicated than it should be.
There aren't many people in Hollywood who can say they've done it all. But then again, there aren't many people like Clint Eastwood. From TV cowboy to international movie star to Oscar-winning director, his path through the entertainment business reads like something out of a Hollywood script. This is the bizarre career of Clint Eastwood, the unlikely beginning. Born in San Francisco on May 31st, 1930, Clinton Eastwood Jr. grew up during the Great Depression. His father worked as a manufacturing executive at Georgia Pacific, and the family moved around quite a bit throughout California during those lean years. Young Clint wasn't what you'd call a model student. He got held back a grade due to poor academic performance, and the trouble didn't stop there. At Piedmont High School, he crossed a line when he wrote an obscene suggestion to a school official on the athletic field scoreboard and burned an effigy on the school lawn. The school asked him to leave, and he finished up at Oakland Technical High School, graduating in February 1949. After high school, Eastwood bounced around doing whatever work he could find. He worked as a lifeguard, delivered papers, clerked at a grocery store, fought forest fires, and caddied at golf courses. He even tried logging and baling hay. These weren't exactly the jobs of someone destined for stardom, but life has a funny way of taking unexpected turns. In 1950, the Korean War was heating up, and Eastwood got drafted into the United States Army. But instead of seeing combat overseas, he was stationed at Fort Ord in Monterey, California. There, he worked as a swimming instructor at the base pool. It was during those days at Fort Ord that fate stepped in. Some young actors he met encouraged him to think about acting. At the time, it probably seemed like a long shot. But after his discharge in 1953, Eastwood decided to give it a try. He enrolled at Los Angeles City College, supposedly to study business administration. But he spent most of his time hanging around the drama department instead. The contacts he made there led to his first screen test at Universal Studios in 1954. Eastwood later said he hated that screen test, thought he'd blown any chance he had before it even started. But Universal saw something in the tall, handsome young man and offered him a contract starting May 1st, 1954. The deal paid $75 a week. It wasn't much, even by 1954 standards, but it was a foot in the door. The Universal years and an unexpected firing. What happened next at Universal became one of those Hollywood stories that gets told and retold. Eastwood was given small, mostly uncredited roles in B-movies. He appeared in monster pictures like Revenge of the Creature and Francis in the Navy, but after about a year and a half, Universal fired him. The reason? According to fellow actor Burt Reynolds, who got fired on the same day, the studio had some peculiar complaints. They told Eastwood his Adam's apple stuck out too far. He had a chipped tooth he refused to fix, he talked too slow, and he didn't listen well enough. That slow, deliberate way of speaking that became one of his most recognizable traits was seen as a speech impediment. The executives at Universal wanted him to fix it. Reynolds later joked that while he could work on his acting ability, poor Eastwood had that Adam's apple problem that wasn't going anywhere. After Universal let him go, Eastwood did what struggling actors have always done. He took odd jobs to pay the bills. By 1958, he was back to digging swimming pools in the San Fernando Valley, sweating under that California sun. He'd get the occasional acting gig on Highway Patrol or Death Valley days, but nothing steady, nothing that looked like a real career. He played a coward opposite James Garner on Maverick. He had decent billing in a picture called The First Traveling Saleslady with Carol Channing, but the film flopped. Things weren't looking promising.
So every time you make these giant budget films, you're putting the odds of having to be one of the top 5 films ever made just to break even, much less get into a profit situation.
Rawhide and the big break. Then came one of those Hollywood moments that seems almost too perfect to be true. Eastwood was visiting a friend at CBS, walking down one of those long studio hallways, when an executive popped out of a doorway. The man took one look at Eastwood and asked if he was an actor. Turned out the network was casting for a Western series called Rawhide, and they needed someone for the second lead. That's how Rowdy Yates was born. Rawhide premiered on January 9th, 1959, and it became a major hit. The show ran for 7 years and 217 episodes. For the first time in his career, Eastwood had steady work and a regular paycheck. The premiere episode reached the top 20 in the Nielsen ratings. After the first season of 22 episodes, seasons 2 through 7 each consisted of 30 episodes. That's a grueling production schedule, mostly weekly, with just a 3 to 4 month break between seasons. Eastwood wasn't particularly thrilled with the character. Rowdy was supposed to be young and cloddish, and Eastwood was pushing 30. He knew the role was keeping him employed, but it wasn't the kind of part that was going to make him a star. The show itself was interesting for its time. It frequently dealt with controversial topics. There were episodes about morphine addiction, racism faced by Mexican drovers, encounters with American Indians, and the aftermath of the Civil War. But Eastwood's character remained somewhat one-dimensional. The show had its own folk hero quality. The theme song, with lyrics by Ned Washington and music by Dmitri Tiomkin, was sung by Frankie Laine. The orchestra was conducted by a young John Williams, who was credited then as Johnny Williams. Filming took place at Universal International Studios in Hollywood, the same place that had fired Eastwood just a few years earlier. During those Rawhide years, something interesting happened. Eastwood started thinking more about the camera, about how scenes were put together. He watched the director's work and thought about how he might do things differently. There was one particular stampede scene where he had specific ideas about how it should have been shot. He asked Eric Fleming, the show's lead, if he'd mind if Eastwood tried directing an episode. Fleming was fine with it, but when Eastwood approached the producers, they weren't quite as enthusiastic. They let him direct some promotional trailers for the upcoming season, but he never got to helm a full episode. Still, the seed was planted. The Italian detour that changed everything. In 1964, during a hiatus from Rawhide, Eastwood got an offer that didn't look like much on paper. An unknown Italian director named Sergio Leone wanted him for a Western shooting in Spain. The money was poor, maybe around $15,000. The prestige was non-existent, but Eastwood saw something in the script that interested him. The character was nothing like Rowdy Yates. This was a grizzled, morally ambiguous man with no name and no illusions about the world. Actors James Coburn and Charles Bronson had both turned down the role. It wasn't the kind of part that seemed like a career maker, but Eastwood took a chance, and a fistful of dollars turned everything around. Leone didn't speak English, and Eastwood didn't speak Italian. So Eastwood struck a deal with the producer that he could rewrite the dialogue. The translations from Italian to English were awkward, and Eastwood knew it needed fixing. He said the stories were fine, but the dialogue was terrible because it had been interpreted by an Italian into English. Working with Leone was unlike anything Eastwood had experienced. Leone was meticulous, almost obsessive about his shots. He'd reshoot scenes multiple times to get exactly what he wanted. This was the opposite of the fast-paced TV production Eastwood was used to on Rawhide. But the collaboration worked. Leone's operatic visual style combined with Eastwood's understated performance created something entirely new. The film wasn't released in the United States until 1967, but it made Eastwood an international sensation. He went back to Italy for 2 more films with Leone, for a few dollars more in 1965, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in 1966. Each film was more ambitious than the last, with bigger budgets and grander scope. There's a detail about those movies that says something about Eastwood's practical nature. He wore the same poncho, that distinctive sirop, in all 3 films, and according to the stories, he never washed it. By the time they finished The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that thing must have been something else. It became one of the most iconic costumes in cinema history. When the films finally played in American theaters in 1967 and 1968, audiences didn't quite know what to make of this new version of Clint Eastwood. As late as July 1968, a syndicated columnist named Dorothy Manners wrote that people on the street were still asking, "Who's Clint Eastwood?" But that was about to change in a hurry. The spaghetti western genre that Leone pioneered with Eastwood became hugely influential, changing how westerns were made for decades to come.
I'd like to be involved in pictures where it's all there, you know. It's all there on the screen. If it costs $1 million film, hopefully it looks like $2 million.
Becoming an American star. In 1967, Eastwood formed his own production company, Malpaso Productions. The first film under the Malpaso banner was Hang 'em High in 1968, a western that brought the man with no-name sensibility back to American soil. When it opened in August, it had the largest opening weekend in United Artists history. Critics praised it, and suddenly Eastwood wasn't just an international curiosity. He was a bona fide American movie star. Before Hang 'em High even hit theaters, Eastwood was already working on Coogan's Bluff, about an Arizona deputy sheriff chasing a criminal through New York City. It reunited him with Universal, the studio that had fired him years earlier. This time, they were paying him over $1 million, more than double what he'd made before. The director was Don Siegel, and the two men would collaborate multiple times over the coming years. In 1970, Eastwood starred in Two Mules for Sister Sarah and Kelly's Heroes, both opening on the same night. That same year, President Nixon appointed him to the National Council on the Arts. By 1971, 1972, and 1973, Eastwood was the #1 box office attraction in America. That's quite a journey from digging swimming pools. The director emerges. The year 1971 turned out to be a pivotal one. Eastwood made his directorial debut with Play Misty for Me, a psychological thriller about a radio disc jockey stalked by an obsessed fan played by Jessica Walter. He'd wanted to direct for years, and now he finally got his chance. The film was shot in and around Carmel, California, an area Eastwood loved and would later call home. The film received good reviews and did well at the box office. More importantly, it established that Eastwood knew what he was doing behind the camera. He understood pacing, tension, and how to tell a story visually. Also, in 1971, he took on the role that would define him for millions of people. San Francisco Police Inspector Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry. Directed by Don Siegel, the film was a cultural phenomenon. Harry was a loose cannon cop who didn't play by the rules, and the movie helped establish an entire genre. The film received critical acclaim and became a massive commercial success. It spawned 4 sequels: Magnum Force in 1973, The Enforcer in 1976, Sudden Impact in 1983, which Eastwood directed himself, and The Deadpool in 1988. Throughout the 1970s, Eastwood kept working steadily as both actor and director. He made westerns like Joe Kidd in 1972, High Plains Drifter in 1973, and The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1976. That last one was the first of 6 films he'd make with actress Sandra Locke, who was his romantic partner at the time. The Outlaw Josie Wales was particularly well received, showing Eastwood's growing confidence as a director. He directed Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in 1974, an action comedy that paired him with Jeff Bridges. The Gauntlet in 1977 reunited him with Locke in an action thriller. Then came the prison film Escape from Alcatraz in 1979, directed again by Don Siegel. Eastwood played Frank Lee Morris, the real-life prisoner who escaped from the supposedly escape-proof prison. The film was tense, atmospheric, and became one of the defining prison movies of all time. Then, in 1978, he did something nobody expected. He made a comedy, Every Which Way But Loose, about a truck driver and bare-knuckle fighter who travels around with an orangutan named Clyde, became the biggest hit of his career up to that point. Critics didn't love it, but audiences went wild for it. Taking inflation into account, it still ranks as one of his most commercially successful films. He made a sequel, Any Which Way You Can, in 1980, which also performed well at the box office. These films showed that Eastwood could succeed in virtually any genre he tried.
One's turning 13 and the other's 16. When you're just surrounded by estrogen, sort of like here tonight.
The mature years. By the 1980s, Eastwood had become a Hollywood institution. He'd proven himself as both a reliable box office draw and a capable director. But he wasn't content to just coast. He continued making westerns, including Pale Rider in 1985, which opened the Cannes Film Festival. The film was a neo-mythic western with quasi-religious overtones that showcased Eastwood's iconic presence. It was one of the few successful westerns in a decade that had largely abandoned the genre. In 1986, he made Heartbreak Ridge, playing an old-school Marine sergeant on the verge of retirement. His tough approach whips a group of raw recruits into shape for the invasion of Grenada. The film was entertaining and showed Eastwood could still carry an action picture as he approached his mid-50s. In 1988, he directed Bird, a film biography of jazz saxophonist Charlie Parker, with Forrest Whitaker in the lead role. Eastwood had been a lifelong jazz devotee and an accomplished pianist himself. Bird wasn't a commercial blockbuster, but it showed the depth of his interests and his willingness to tackle serious, adult material. The film was beautifully shot and deeply respectful of Parker's genius and tragedy. Eastwood also produced a documentary about Thelonious Monk called Straight, No Chaser the same year. Then, in 1990, he made White Hunter, Black Heart, his most audacious project of that period. It was an adaptation of Peter Viertel's novel about working with director John Huston on The African Queen. Eastwood bravely took on the role of the Huston character, embodying the legendary director's rugged physical presence and obsessive personality. The film wasn't a commercial success, but it showed Eastwood's growing ambition as a filmmaker. In 1986, Eastwood did something that seemed out of character for a Hollywood icon. He ran for mayor of Carmel-by-the-Sea, California. The reason? He disapproved of the city's zoning laws, particularly regulations that affected property owners and businesses. He won, served a 2-year term, changed the laws, and then stepped down. It was vintage Eastwood. See a problem, fix it, move on. His time in politics was brief but effective. The early 1990s brought what many consider Eastwood's masterpiece. Unforgiven, released in 1992, was a revisionist Western about an aging gunfighter pulled back into violence. Eastwood directed and starred in the film, which won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. He was also nominated for Best Actor. Critics who had spent decades dismissing him as just an action star had to reconsider. The film made almost every year-end Best 10 list. The National Society of Film Critics and the Los Angeles Film Critics Association both awarded Unforgiven their Best Picture prize and Eastwood their Best Director award. Suddenly, Eastwood was being talked about as one of America's great filmmakers. In 1993, he took on the role of a Secret Service agent protecting the president in the Line of Fire. Then came The Bridges of Madison County in 1995, a romantic drama opposite Meryl Streep. Eastwood surprised audiences with a sensitive, understated performance. The film showed a different side of him, one that audiences hadn't seen much of before.
There's a little guy right inside the back there, and he says, "Don't do that." I don't have a lot of brains, but I have a good gut feeling.
The late 1990s and early 2000s brought a mix of results. Films like Absolute Power in 1997, True Crime in 1999, and Bloodwork in 2002 were competent but didn't make much of an impact. Space Cowboys in 2000 did reasonably well, bringing together Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, and James Garner as retired engineers sent into space. The second act. Then came another turning point. In 2003, Eastwood directed Mystic River, a crime drama starring Sean Penn, Tim Robbins, and Kevin Bacon. The film dealt with themes of murder, vigilantism, and sexual abuse. It was praised by critics and won 2 Academy Awards. Penn won Best Actor, and Robbins won Best Supporting Actor, making Mystic River the first film since Ben-Hur in 1959 to win both categories. Eastwood was nominated for Best Director and Best Picture. The National Society of Film Critics named him Best Director of the Year. The following year brought $1 Million Baby, a boxing drama with Hilary Swank and Morgan Freeman. The film won 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress for Swank, and Best Supporting Actor for Freeman. At age 74, Eastwood became the oldest person to win the Best Director Oscar. In 2006, he took on an ambitious project: 2 companion films about the Battle of Iwo Jima, one from the American perspective and one from the Japanese. Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima showed the same battle from both sides. Letters from Iwo Jima was particularly acclaimed, earning Eastwood another Best Director nomination. In 2008, he directed and starred in Gran Torino, playing Walt Kowalski, a Korean War veteran and retired auto worker. The film opened with a $30 million weekend in January 2009, making Eastwood the oldest leading man to reach #1 at the box office. Gran Torino eventually grossed over $268 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing film of his career. The final stretch. Eastwood continued working throughout the 2000s and 10s. He directed J. Edgar in 2011 with Leonardo DiCaprio as FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In 2014, he made American Sniper, the story of Navy SEAL Chris Kyle. The film became the highest-grossing domestic release of the year and earned 6 Oscar nominations. He made Sully in 2016, telling the story of Captain Chesley Sullenberger's emergency landing on the Hudson River, with Tom Hanks in the lead role. The film grossed over $240 million worldwide. In 2018, at age 88, Eastwood returned to acting with The Mule, directing himself as a 90-year-old horticulturist who becomes a drug courier. The film made $174 million. Richard Jewell in 2019 told the story of the security guard wrongly suspected in the 1996 Olympic Park bombing. Then came Cry Macho in 2021. Eastwood was now over 90, directing himself as a former rodeo star finding redemption in Mexico. The film was released during the pandemic and struggled at the box office, making only about $16.5 million globally against a $33 million budget. At Warner Brothers, executives started questioning their relationship with Eastwood. In a leaked conference call, CEO David Zaslav reportedly said, "We don't owe anyone any favors," when reminded that Eastwood had given the studio many hits over the years and had never delivered a movie late or over budget.
I've been lucky enough to work in a career that I've enjoyed, a job that I've enjoyed, and a lot of people can't say that.
The possible farewell. In 2024, at age 94, Eastwood directed what might be his final film, Juror Number 2, a legal thriller starring Nicholas Hoult, Toni Collette, and J.K. Simmons. The film premiered at AFI Fest on October 27, 2024. But Warner Brothers gave it a peculiar release, opening it in fewer than 50 theaters domestically. For a filmmaker who had partnered with the studio for over 50 years, it was a disappointing treatment. Critics praised the film, giving it a 92% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. In France, where Eastwood is revered, the film grossed over $3 million in a single weekend. It received a wide release in the United Kingdom with over 300 screens. But in America, most audiences couldn't see it, even if they wanted to. The National Board of Review named it one of the top 10 films of 2024. Eastwood has never officially announced his retirement. When asked about it in 2021, he said he'd be open to making another movie if the story and idea were fun to him. He also said he keeps directing because "I just like it." Cast members from Juror Number 2 say he was looking for other projects during production delays caused by the SAG-AFTRA strikes. The Eastwood method. Over his 40 films as a director, Eastwood developed a distinctive working style. He's known for shooting quickly, often finishing ahead of schedule and under budget. He rarely allows more than a couple of takes, trusting his actors to be prepared from day one. He's described his approach as being a fly on the wall, showing the film exactly as written on the page. This efficiency sometimes works against him, but more often results in focused, powerful films. Throughout his career, Eastwood has shown a skeptical view of institutions. Whether it's a corrupt police force in Changeling, the manipulations of the media in Sully and Richard Jewell, or the failures of government in various films, he's consistently questioned authority. The legacy. Looking back at Eastwood's career, what stands out is how unlikely the whole thing was. The studio that fired him for talking too slow later paid him millions. The low-budget Italian westerns nobody wanted turned him into an international star. The TV cowboy became one of the most respected directors in American cinema. He went from being perceived as just an action star to winning multiple Academy Awards. He's one of the few people who succeeded at the highest levels as both an actor and a director. John Wayne, Gary Cooper, Spencer Tracy, James Stewart, and Humphrey Bogart never directed features. Eastwood not only directed, he excelled at it. He made films across every genre: westerns, thrillers, comedies, romances, war films, biopics, dramas. He worked with some of the greatest actors of multiple generations, and he did it all on his own terms, with his own production company. In 1996, he received the AFI Life Achievement Award. In 2006, the Stanley Kubrick Britannia Award for Excellence in Film from BAFTA. In 2010, the National Medal of Arts, the highest honor given by the United States government. Whether Juror Number 2 truly is his last film, or whether he'll find another project that interests him, Clint Eastwood's place in film history is secure. He outlasted the studio system that tried to mold him, outlasted the critics who dismissed him, outlasted changing tastes and trends, from swimming pool digger to Hollywood legend, from fired Universal contract player to two-time Oscar-winning director, from TV cowboy to American icon. It really is a bizarre career when you think about it, and that's exactly what makes it so remarkable. If you enjoyed learning about Clint Eastwood's incredible journey through Hollywood, Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the people who shaped entertainment history. Thanks for watching.